his quill for a new edition of his book set to reveal huge secrets inside Prince Harry.
The intention was clearly to create a flawless, routine moment of celebrity celebration, a polished birthday photograph, radiant smiles, and carefully curated aesthetics designed to elicit warmth and routine well wishes. It was meant to be a quiet affirmation of status and poise. Instead, within hours of its posting, that single image curdled into something far louder and more disruptive than anyone could have predicted. The machinery of online adoration suddenly jammed. The celebration ceased to be about the milestone itself and transformed into a forensic examination of the subject. The reaction was not initially driven by hostility or organized hate, though those elements always exist in the margins. This was different. It was organic confusion. Viewers were pausing in their scrolls, looking twice, and then zooming in with an intensity usually reserved for crime scene photos. One single post lit the fuse. Almost immediately, screenshots began to spread across platforms. Side-by-side comparisons were constructed, placing the new image against clips from 5 years prior, then 10, then 15. The conversation exploded not because of a proven scandal, but because of a collective, unsettling sense that something was off. Not necessarily wrong, just indistinct, blurry around the edges where it should have been sharp. In the digital age, uncertainty is high-grade fuel. What distinguished this viral moment was that it wasn't rooted in criticism of attire or behavior, but in a fundamental confusion about time itself. Viewers weren't making accusations initially. They were asking wildly uncomfortable questions. Why did the established timeline feel so elastic? Why did appearances from the relatively recent past look like they belonged to a different era entirely? Why did the basic arithmetic of biography suddenly feel like complex algebra? Usually, this type of internet speculation is a flash in the pan, intense but ephemeral. It flares up, consumes the oxygen in the room, and dies down when the next distraction arrives. This time, however, the smoke didn't clear. Instead of fading, the speculation sharpened its focus. Quiet whispers in comment sections coalesced into focused, detailed discussions in dedicated forums. And then, the tenor of the entire situation shifted dramatically because a specific name surfaced in connection with the growing doubts. It wasn't a blogger, a royal commentator, or a faceless gossip account. It was someone with a fearsome reputation built on documents, immovable dates, and uncomfortable truths. When Tom Bower enters a narrative, it ceases to be internet noise and transforms into something that cannot be easily dismissed. The images that started it all were, on the surface, impeccable. The lighting was flattering, the posture exuded confidence, and the framing was engineered to project youth, vitality, and total control over the personal narrative. It wasn't just a birthday post. It was a strategic statement designed to reinforce a very specific, carefully maintained image. At first, the machinery worked as intended. Compliments rolled in, headlines echoed the admiration, and the script was being followed. But then the glitch happened. The tones changed. Viewers stopped passively consuming and started actively studying. Faces were enlarged on high-definition screens until expressions were frozen into pixels. The side-by-side dossiers appeared, comparing this idealized moment to interviews from years earlier, red carpet appearances from the mid-2000s, and forgotten roles in early television. What stood out in this growing frenzy wasn't outrage. It was a cold, calculating curiosity. People were no longer attacking. They were auditing. Timelines were pulled from archives. Ages casually mentioned in magazine profiles from 2 decades ago were cross-referenced against video footage from the same period. Some viewers claimed the numbers simply didn't reconcile with the visual evidence. Others argued that stress, public pressure, and stylistic evolution can drastically alter anyone's appearance. But once the debate had been ignited, it refused to be extinguished. The shift from admiration to analysis was instantaneous. Compliments gave way to queries. Queries mutated into sprawling threads, and threads calcified into elaborate theories. Suddenly, the birthday photos were no longer being admired. They were being dissected on an operating table of public opinion. The danger of this moment wasn't that anyone had definitive proof of deception. The danger lay in the fact that the images invited scrutiny at the precise moment public receptiveness to curated realities was at its lowest ebb. In a media climate obsessively focused on authenticity, even the smallest perceived inconsistency becomes a magnet for massive suspicion. Yet, speculation on its own rarely survives the news cycle. It only becomes a genuine story when someone with institutional credibility steps in to give it weight. Rumors about age and timeline discrepancies weren't new. They had surfaced before, flickered briefly in dark corners of the internet, and disappeared. In Hollywood, timelines are notoriously blurry. Biographies change, and numbers shift quietly to accommodate casting requirements. Normally, that's where the story ends, accepted as part of the industry's smoke and mirrors. But this time, it stalled, and then it grew exponentially. People started digging backward into the analog era instead of forward into the digital one. Old, grainy interviews resurfaced where answers regarding personal history seemed strangely rehearsed or carefully evasive. Acting profiles from early 2000s casting websites reappeared, each listing slightly different vital statistics. Casting directories, promotional blurbs, archived newspaper articles. Nothing dramatic on its own, but together they formed an uncomfortable mosaic. A pattern emerged. What unsettled viewers wasn't a single smoking gun contradiction, it was the repetition. The same small discrepancies appeared again and again across different years, different sources, and different platforms. In isolation, each could be explained away as a typo or a misquote. Taken together, they began to feel intentional, or at least managed. Even staunch defenders had to admit the timing was catastrophic. The birthday images had reopened a conversation at a moment when public patience was already thin and trust was fragile. Instead of dismissing the speculation as nonsense, people lingered on it, shared it, and debated it. Critics argued this wasn't about Hollywood casting flexibility anymore. This was about consistency and transparency from a public figure who had repeatedly emphasized honesty as a core brand value while being accused of carefully shaping her own basic timeline. Once that idea took hold, the conversation crossed a critical threshold. It stopped being background noise and became something mainstream reporters were forced to notice. Tom Bower did not enter the conversation violently. There was no teaser campaign, no dramatic press release. His name simply began circulating, first in media circles, then among commentators who understood the gravity of his involvement. Bower is not a pundit who trades in opinions. He is an investigator who trades in forensics. His reputation was built entirely on paperwork, on dates that do not move, on timelines that refuse to bend to PR narratives. For decades, he has made a career out of dismantling carefully constructed public images, not with vitriol, but with documents and witnesses under oath. When Bower speaks, it is rarely speculative and almost never accidental. According to multiple reports, he hadn't just stumbled into this story based on the recent photos. He had been researching quietly for months, far from the noise of social media. He had been cross-checking records, revisiting early documentation, and speaking to sources who were not eager to go on the record. This is the kind of slow, unglamorous work that happens long before the public hears a whisper. That's why his involvement instantly changed the atmospheric pressure around the story. Online chatter suddenly felt heavier and more consequential. Journalists who had previously ignored the rumors as tabloid-esque began paying close attention. Producers started making calls. This wasn't someone reacting to a trend. This was someone who creates the news agenda based on hard evidence. Those familiar with Bower's methods know he doesn't chase stories. He waits until he has them fully cornered. The moment everything shifted happened live on television. There were no edits, no walkbacks, and no carefully framed statements from a spokesperson. Tom Bower appeared on screen holding what immediately mesmerized the audience: physical documents. Not screenshots, not digital summaries, but actual paper. He didn't rush. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. Instead, he did something far more unsettling. He talked with clinical detachment about official records. He spoke of dates and files that did not align the way bureaucratic records should. Specifically, he mentioned documents tied to Meghan's birth year that, in his words, directly conflicted with one another. The key detail wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. He was calm, measured, almost professorial. He never claimed deception. He never used the word lie. He simply pointed out that multiple official records appeared to tell different factual stories about the same individual, and then he stopped talking. The studio reaction filled the silence. The host froze, caught between the explosive implications and the lack of a direct accusation.